The invitation arrived in a heavy, cream-colored envelope that felt more like a subpoena than a request for family gathering. It wasn't handwritten by my daughter, Patricia. It was printed in calligraphy by a hired assistant, dictating that my presence was expected at the estate of Preston Calloway for Thanksgiving dinner at 5 o'clock sharp. No, love, Patricia. No, we miss you, Dad. Just a command on cold cardstock. I'm Erickson. To the world, I'm a man who drives a beat-up sedan, wears flannel shirts that have seen better decades, and spends my retirement fixing small engines in my garage. My neighbors in our quiet cul-de-sac just see an old guy who keeps to himself. They don't know about the 35 years I spent as a forensic auditor for the Department of Justice. They don't know that I spent half my life dissecting the intricate financial lies of cartels, corrupt senators, and corporate fraudsters. To them, I'm just Erickson. And honestly, I preferred it that way. I looked at the invitation sitting on my oil-stained workbench. I hadn't seen Patricia in 6 months. Her husband, Roland, had slowly isolated her, pulling her deeper into the gravity well of his father's massive wealth and ego. I missed her laugh. I missed the way she used to look before the anxiety set in. Before she started checking her watch every 2 minutes to make sure she wasn't late for Roland's demands. Before I get into the car and take you up that winding driveway to the events that changed everything, I have a small favor to ask. If you believe that justice is something worth fighting for, please hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always wins, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from tonight. I read them all, and it helps to know I'm not talking to an empty room. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. I wiped my hands on a rag and picked up the card. I knew going there was a mistake. I knew being in the same room as Preston Calloway was going to test every ounce of discipline I had developed over a career of sitting across from liars. But for Patricia, I would walk into the lion's den. I put on my best suit. It was 10 years old, but clean, and headed out the door. The drive to the Calloway estate took 40 minutes, moving from the comfortable, lived-in streets of my neighborhood to the wrought iron gates of the Highlands. This was where the houses stopped being homes and started being compounds. The architecture here shouted about money so loudly you couldn't hear the birds sing. I pulled my sedan up the paver driveway, parking it behind a row of luxury SUVs and imported sports cars that cost more than my entire retirement fund. The house loomed over me, a monstrosity of gray stone and glass, cold and imposing. It felt less like a place to eat turkey and more like a fortress designed to keep reality out. Roland opened the door. My son-in-law was a man who had never been told no in his life, yet somehow still looked perpetually worried that someone was about to take his toys away. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that looked soft enough to melt, but his eyes were hard. "Erickson," he said. "Not Dad. Not Mr. Erickson. Just my last name," barked like I was a delivery driver running late. "You're early? We aren't serving appetizers for another 20 minutes. Traffic was light," I said, stepping inside before he could block the way. "Good to see you, Roland." He didn't return the sentiment. He just checked his watch, a gold timepiece that was probably worth a year of college tuition. "Right. Well, try not to touch anything in the foyer. The vase is Ming Dynasty. Dad would lose it if it got smudged." It's interesting what people prioritize. When you value things over people, you start treating people like things, obstacles to be managed or tools to be used. I walked past the vase without looking at it. I wasn't here for the pottery. I found Patricia in the kitchen, but she wasn't relaxing with a glass of wine. She was frantically arranging distinct crackers on a silver tray, her hands trembling slightly. When she turned and saw me, Her face crumpled for a split second, a flash of pure exhaustion, before she plastered on a bright, brittle smile. "Dad, you made it," she whispered, coming over to hug me. When I held her, I felt my heart sink. She was thin, too thin. Her shoulder blades felt sharp under her silk blouse. She smelled like expensive perfume and fear. "Hey, kiddo," I said softly, pulling back to look at her. "You okay? You look tired." "I'm fine," she said, the lie coming out automatic and rehearsed. "Just busy. Dad Calloway. He wants everything perfect this year. He invited a few business partners, so it's not just family. It's a networking thing." "On Thanksgiving?" I asked. She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Business never sleeps, right? That's what Roland says." She went back to the crackers, adjusting them by millimeters. I watched her, remembering the girl who used to hike mountains with me. The girl who built landscape designs with dirt under her fingernails and a fire in her eyes. That girl was fading, being sanded down by the expectations of men who thought a wife was just another accessory to match the drapes. We moved into the great room, a cavernous space with ceilings so high the heat probably never reached the floor. That's where he was. Preston Calloway, the patriarch, the tycoon of regional infrastructure. He was standing by the fireplace, holding a tumbler of amber liquid, holding court with two men in suits who looked terrified of him. Preston was in his 60s, built like a bulldog, with silver hair and a face that had forgotten how to show kindness. He saw me enter. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just gave a slight dismissive nod, the kind you give to a waiter when you want the check. "Roland," Preston boomed, his voice echoing off the marble. "Get your father-in-law a beer or something. I assume he doesn't have a palate for the scotch we're drinking." Roland laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Right away, Dad. Erickson's more of a domestic lagers guy, aren't you, Frank?" "Water is fine," I said, my voice even. I walked over to the group, extending a hand to Preston. "Happy Thanksgiving, Preston." He looked at my hand for a second, then shook it briefly, his grip aggressive, a power move. "Frank, surprised you drove that old heap up the driveway. Hope it didn't leak oil on my pavers." "I just had them sealed." "It's dry as a bone," I lied. It might have leaked a drop. I didn't care. "Well," Preston turned his back to me, addressing his business associates. "As I was saying, the zoning laws are just suggestions if you know who to call. We're going to bulldoze that community center in March. The margins on the luxury condos are too good to pass up." I stood there, invisible to them. But I was listening. I had spent 35 years listening to men like this. They always think they are untouchable. They always think the walls have no ears. Dinner was served in a dining room that looked like a scene from a period drama, complete with a chandelier that probably cost more than my house. We sat at a long mahogany table. Preston at the head, Roland to his right, Patricia to his left. I was placed at the far end, practically in a different zip code. The wine service began. Preston made a show of it, holding up a dusty bottle. 1998 Cabernet, he announced. $500 a bottle. I opened 3. "Roland, make sure Patricia doesn't gulp it down. It's meant to be savored, not swilled like soda." Patricia shrank in her chair. "I know how to drink wine, Preston." "Do you?" He sneered. "Could have fooled me. I saw the credit card bill for your little landscaping business last month. Buying supplies from Home Depot? Please, you're losing money, honey. It's a hobby, not a business." Stop pretending you're contributing to this family's legacy. I gripped my fork. The metal bit into my palm. I have clients, Patricia said softly. I designed the Miller garden last week. The Millers are nobodies, Preston laughed. And so is their garden. Roland chuckled along with his father, taking a sip of the expensive wine. He's just trying to help you be realistic, Patty. You don't have the head for business. It is a painful thing to watch the light go out in your child's eyes. It hurts more than any physical blow. If you are listening to this, and you have ever felt small in a room full of giant egos, please subscribe to the channel. It tells me you're out there, standing against this kind of behavior. It helps us keep telling these stories. The meal continued, and so did the verbal assault. It wasn't just Patricia anymore. Preston turned his sights on me. So, Erickson, he shouted down the table, what are you doing with your days now? Still tinkering with lawnmowers? It must be nice to have zero responsibility. No empire to run, no payroll to meet. I keep busy, I said, cutting my turkey. I enjoy the quiet. Quiet, Preston scoffed. That's code for useless. See, this is the problem with your side of the family, Patricia. You come from stock that settles. Frank here spent his life, what was it? Pushing papers for the government? A civil servant? Something like that, I said. A leech on the taxpayer, Preston corrected, winking at his business partners. I built roads. I built bridges. I created value. You just checked boxes. And now you live in that little shack and drive that rust bucket. It's embarrassing, honestly, that Roland has to be associated with it. Dad lives a good life, Patricia said, her voice shaking. He's honest. Honesty doesn't pay for private jets, sweetheart, Roland chimed in, eager to please his father. Let's be real. Frank is a nice guy, but he's not on our level. I took a sip of water. I watched them. I analyzed them. Preston was a narcissist with a God complex. Roland was a coward hiding behind his father's checkbook. They mistook my silence for weakness. That is a common mistake among the corrupt. The tension at the table was a physical weight. The air felt thick. Patricia was barely eating. She was pushing her stuffing around her plate, trying to make herself invisible. Stop playing with your food, Preston snapped. It's disrespectful to the chef. I'm not hungry, Patricia murmured. You're ungrateful, Preston said, his voice rising. We give you this life. We give you this house. Roland bought you a new car last month, and all you do is mope. You walk around like a victim. It's pathetic. I'm not moping, Patricia said, looking up. There was a spark of her old self there. I'm just tired of being spoken to like a child. I am 30 years old. I run a business. I bought the groceries for this dinner, by the way. I organized the staff. You bought the groceries? Preston laughed, a cruel barking sound. With whose money? Roland's money. My money. You haven't earned a dime that matters in your life. That's not fair, Patricia said. Her voice was getting louder. I work hard. You play in the dirt, Preston shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. You are a glorified gardener, relying on the Callaway name to get contracts. Without us, you are nothing, just like your father. The room went silent. The business partners were staring at their plates. Roland was swirling his wine, refusing to look at his wife. Patricia stood up. Her face was flushed red. I think I need to leave, she said. I'm not going to sit here and be insulted. Sit down, Preston commanded. No, Patricia said. She grabbed her purse from the back of the chair. Preston's face turned a violent shade of purple. He stood up, swaying slightly. The alcohol was doing the talking now, stripping away whatever thin veneer of civilization he had left. He reached for his wine glass, the $500 Cabernet, and he didn't take a sip. He lunged forward. During Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter's father-in-law threw red wine in her face. Her husband laughed, saying, "Thanks, Dad. Maybe that'll teach her some respect." I felt my hands grip the chair. I stood up and made one phone call. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The dark red liquid splashed across her face, dripping down her white silk blouse, staining it like blood. Patricia gasped, freezing in shock. She stood there, humiliated, the wine dripping from her chin onto the expensive rug. And Roland. Roland laughed. He actually laughed. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the droplets of wine hitting the floor. I saw the smirk of satisfaction on Preston's face. I saw the betrayal in my daughter's eyes as she looked at her husband, the man who was supposed to protect her, and saw him mocking her pain. I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the same feeling I used to get before a raid. The emotions, the anger, the rage, the desire to leap across the table and break Preston's jaw were boxed up and put away. Violence is messy. Violence is temporary. I didn't want temporary satisfaction. I wanted total devastation. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was quiet, steady. It cut through the room like a razor. I stood up. I didn't look at Patricia. I couldn't bear the shame in her eyes yet. I looked at Preston. I memorized his face. "Where are you going, janitor?" Preston sneered, sitting back down. "Can't handle a little family discipline?" I didn't answer. I walked out of the dining room, my footsteps echoing on the marble. I walked down the long hallway, past the Ming Dynasty vase, and into the foyer. I stepped out onto the front porch, into the cool evening air. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. I pulled my old, cracked smartphone from my pocket. I scrolled past the local pizza place, past the auto parts store, until I found a number I hadn't dialed in 3 years. Agent Holloway. Holloway was the director of the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network for the Southeast region. He was also the man whose life I'd saved during a botched operation in Miami back in '98. He picked up on the second ring. "Erickson, is that you? It's Thanksgiving." "I need a favor, Holloway," I said, "and I need it now." "Talk to me," he said. His tone shifted instantly from casual to professional. "I'm at the Calloway estate, Preston Calloway. You know him?" "We've had him on a watch list for 2 years, Holloway said. "Suspected money laundering through construction contracts. But we can't pin the tail on the donkey. He's too careful with his paper trails." "He's not careful," I said. "He's arrogant. He's bragging about the Northwood Project zoning bribes. And Holloway? He's keeping the second set of books in the house. I heard him mention the safe room in the library to his partners tonight. He feels safe here. He's sloppy." "You're sure?" "I'm standing 20 feet from the library. Get a warrant. Probable cause is a verified informant, me. I'll testify to the conversation. I can have a team there in 30 minutes. We've been waiting for a break like this." "Make it 20, I said. "And Holloway? Bring everything." I hung up and stood in the dark for a moment. I took a deep breath, smelling the pine trees and the looming storm. Then I turned around and walked back inside. When I re-entered the dining room, the scene hadn't changed much, except Patricia was gone, likely to the bathroom to clean herself up. Preston was refilling his glass. Roland was eating his turkey as if his wife hadn't just been assaulted. "Oh, look who's back," Roland said. Did you go cry in your truck, Frank? I just needed some air, I said, sitting back down. I picked up my napkin and placed it on my lap. Sit down and shut up, Preston grunted. We're talking business. So, as I was saying, the offshore accounts in the Caymans are untraceable if you route them through the Shell Corp in Delaware. I listened. I watched. I let him dig his own grave. Every word he spoke was another nail in the coffin. He thought he was impressing his guests. He had no idea he was confessing to a federal agent. 20 minutes passed. The dessert was being brought out. Some kind of pumpkin souffle. Patricia came back into the room. She had changed into a spare sweater she must have had in her car. Her face was scrubbed raw, her eyes red and puffy. She wouldn't look at anyone. Finally, Preston said. Try not to ruin dessert, Patricia. Dad, please, Roland said. But it was weak. Don't Dad please me, Preston snapped. She needs to learn her place. Just then, the front doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite chime. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding. Preston frowned. Who the hell is that? Roland, go see. Probably some solicitor. Tell them to get off my property or I'll shoot them. Roland stood up, wiping his mouth. Unbelievable. People have no respect for holidays. We heard the heavy front door open. We heard Roland say, "Can I help you?" And then we heard the voice that warms my heart and freezes the blood of criminals everywhere. Federal agents, step aside. The sound of heavy boots on marble is distinct. It's the sound of accountability arriving. 6 agents in windbreakers emblazoned with federal agent stormed into the dining room. Holloway was leading them. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were just as sharp. Preston dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the fine china. What is the meaning of this? Do you know who I am? Preston Calloway, Holloway said, his voice bored. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of racketeering, wire fraud, and tax evasion. We also have a search warrant for these premises. This is harassment, Preston screamed, standing up. I'll have your badges. I know the governor. The governor isn't going to help you with federal charges, sir, Holloway said. He signaled to 2 agents. Cuff him. Roland was backing away, his hands up. I didn't do anything. This is my dad's business. I just work in marketing. We have a warrant for Roland Calloway as well, Holloway said. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Roland's knees buckled. He looked at Patricia. Patty, tell them I'm a good guy. Patricia sat frozen, staring at the chaos. Preston was struggling as the agents pulled his arms behind his back. Who did this? He roared. Who talked? One of you? He glared at his business partners, who were currently being detained against the wall. Actually, Holloway said, the room falling silent. We received a tip from a highly credible source. Holloway turned and looked at me. He gave me a small nod. Good to see you, Agent Erickson, or retired Agent Erickson. Preston froze. The handcuffs clicked shut on his wrists. He turned his head slowly to look at me. Agent? Roland whispered. Frank? I stood up slowly. I brushed the crumbs off my old suit. Forensic auditor, actually, I said calmly. Special Investigations Division, retired. Preston's face went pale. All the blood drained out of him. The realization hit him like a freight train. The janitor, the nobody, the man he had mocked for 2 hours. You, Preston sputtered. You were in my house. I've been investigating trash like you for 35 years, Preston, I said. You're not special. You're just another thief in an expensive suit. The house was turned upside down. Agents were carrying boxes of files out of the library. They found the safe room exactly where I said it would be. I walked over to Patricia. She was still sitting at the table, surrounded by the ruins of the dinner. "Dad," she whispered. You're a Fed?" "I was," I said gently. "A long time ago. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to have a normal life. I didn't want you worrying about the people who wanted to hurt me." "You arrested them," she said, looking at Roland, who was crying as he was led out the door. "I reported a crime," I said. "They arrested themselves when they broke the law." I held out my hand. "Come on, Patricia. Let's get out of here. This isn't your home anymore." She looked at Roland one last time. He was begging the agents not to scratch his watch. She looked at me. She took my hand. We drove back to my house in silence for the first few miles. The flashing lights of the police cars faded in the rearview mirror. We pulled into my driveway, the modest driveway of the janitor. We walked into my small living room, with its worn-out sofa and the smell of old books and engine grease. Patricia sat down on the couch, and finally, the dam broke. She sobbed. She cried for the humiliation, for the wasted years, for the husband who turned out to be a weakling, and for the fear she had been living in. I made her tea. I sat with her. I didn't offer empty platitudes. I just let her cry. "I feel so stupid," she choked out. "I let them treat me like that. I let them treat you like that." "You fell in love," I said. "And manipulators are very good at what they do. They isolate you. They make you doubt yourself. It's not stupidity, Patricia. It's abuse." "He threw wine on me," she whispered, touching her stained cheek. And Roland laughed. "He won't be laughing where he's going," I said. The fallout was swift and brutal. The evidence Holloway seized from the house was a gold mine. Preston hadn't just been bribing zoning officials. He was laundering money for an offshore gambling syndicate. The construction projects were mostly phantom sites. Preston Calloway's assets were frozen. The mansion was seized. The cars, the wine, the Ming Dynasty vase, all of it went to the government to pay back the millions he had stolen in taxes. Roland turned on his father immediately. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he testified about everything. It was pathetic to watch. He blamed his father for every decision, claiming he was just a pawn. The judge didn't buy it entirely, but it was enough to sink Preston for good. Patricia filed for divorce 3 days after Thanksgiving. She moved into my guest room. For the first time in years, she started designing gardens again, just for the joy of it. 2 months later, I was working in the garage when a cab pulled up. It was Roland. He was out on bail, awaiting sentencing. He looked terrible. He had lost 20 pounds, and his expensive haircut was grown out and messy. I didn't put down my wrench. "Frank," he said, standing at the edge of the driveway. He didn't dare come closer. "What do you want, Roland?" "I want to speak to Patricia. Please, I need to explain." "There is nothing to explain," I said. "I love her," he pleaded. "I was scared of my dad. You don't know what he's like." "I know exactly what he is like," I said, stepping forward. "And I know what you are like. You watched him humiliate her. You joined in. You laughed." "I was weak," Roland shouted, tears forming in his eyes. "Yes," I said cold. "You were, and weakness like that is dangerous. You aren't seeing her. Not today, not ever. Get back in that cab, Roland, before I call my friends again." He stood there for a moment, looking at the small, greasy garage, realizing that the power had shifted completely. He got back in the cab. The trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming. Preston Calloway was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. At his age, it was a life sentence. Roland got 5 years for conspiracy. I went to the sentencing. I sat in the back. When the judge read the verdict, Preston turned and looked at the gallery. He scanned the faces until he found mine. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just held his gaze. I wanted him to know that the nobody he had insulted was the architect of his destruction. He looked away first. Later that evening, I was sitting on my back porch. My neighbor, old Mr. Henderson, leaned over the fence. "Heard about the trouble with the in-laws," Henderson said. "Crazy stuff on the news, something about wine and the FBI." I took a sip of my domestic lager. "My son-in-law's father humiliated my daughter at Thanksgiving, so I made one call," I said simply. "That's about the size of it." "Hell of a phone call," Henderson whistled. "Hell of a Thanksgiving," I replied. "Patricia's doing better now. She has her own apartment in town, a small place with a big balcony filled with plants. Her landscape business is booming, legitimately this time, based on her talent, not her last name. We have dinner every Sunday. I cook. She brings the wine, a sensible $10 bottle that tastes just fine. We laugh. We talk about the future. We don't talk about the Calloways. They are ghosts now, fading into the past. I still work on engines in my garage. I'm still just Erickson to the neighborhood. But I sleep better at night. Power isn't about the money in your bank account or the size of your house. It isn't about making other people feel small so you can feel big. Power is the ability to protect the people you love. It's the quiet confidence of knowing the truth. We build our own peace in this life. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the quiet, unstoppable power of truth and justice, please subscribe. It costs nothing, but it means everything to this community. It tells me that we are not alone. I put down my beer and watched the sun set over the modest houses of my street. It was a beautiful view. Far more beautiful than anything I saw at the mansion. Justice had been served, and the bill was paid in full.